This is Unit 4, Long-Term Recovery Planning and Plan Implementation. This is Dr. John Rennie. The unit objectives for this week is to describe the 6 major policy areas of long-term recovery planning, to explain the 6-step recovery planning process, and to describe key challenges to implementing recovery planning. You should have completed all of the requirements for units 1 through 3 in order not to get behind in this course by now.
This week you need to read chapters 5 through 7 in the Schwab book. You need to complete quiz 2 and participate in the forum. Drawing upon the readings and news media coverage from the recent impact of Hurricane Irma in Florida, please pick a community impacted by Irma and discuss what long-term recovery lessons should be applied from the readings to on-the-ground practice in Florida. For assignment 1, I would like for you to draft a memo to the mayor of your community. Include all of the following elements. Discuss the lessons from the recent Hurricane Irma on your community. Describe the importance of leadership in promoting community resilience. Recommend a 6-step planning process for community resilience. And explain the process of forming a collaborative planning team which will set long-term goals and objectives.
So, the 6 major policy areas of long-term recovery are shown here with the circles overlapping the hazard mitigation circle. These include land use and reconstruction standards, infrastructure and transportation restoration, housing recovery, economic development, environmental restoration, health, and social recovery. We'll get back into these in a little bit. But long-term recovery planning is similar to the comp planning process in urban planning. Because many of you are not necessarily planning majors, I want you to understand what comprehensive planning is. First of all, note that not all comp plans are the same. They are each tailored to the specific needs of each community. Comp plans focus on the quality of life, economic, social, and environmental topics that can be addressed by the local community. Changing higher level laws or policies, so for example, state and federal laws, is typically not within the domain of a comp plan. The comp plan is to determine the policies and then the programs and even laws that extend out of those policies for the jurisdiction itself. So if it's a county comp plan, it would be for the county. If it's a local government comp plan, it would be for the local city or town. We're going to watch a brief little video here to see more specifically what a comp plan is.
Welcome to Comprehensive Planning 101. The following presentation will provide you with the background information about the comprehensive plan and the planning process in Fairfax County. A comprehensive plan is mandated by the Code of Virginia and serves as a guide for decision-making about the county's land use. The plan is the long-range vision for land use and development in your community, anticipating change over the next 20 to 30 years. The purpose of planning is to promote the health, safety, and welfare of the public, to manage growth, change, and renewal of the community, to ensure a continued high quality of life for residents, and balance diverse community goals, from sustainability to revitalization issues. You may be asking, why should I care about the comprehensive plan? Whether you are a resident or a business owner, you have a stake in shaping the county's future. Fairfax County is full of different places where we live, work, and play. Some of these places are planned to stay exactly like they are, while others are planned to change in the future. Each of these places is like a piece in a puzzle. It's important to understand how your neighborhood or business and its future fits into the long-term plan for the county's land use and development. The Fairfax County Comprehensive Plan consists of the policy plan, the 4 area plan volumes, and several related maps. The policy plan contains the goals for Fairfax County, which address the future development pattern of the county and the protection of natural and cultural resources for present and future generations, as well as objectives and policies that guide planning and development review considerations for implementing the goals. The 4 area plans represent 4 geographic areas in which the county is divided. These areas are further divided into 14 planning districts and 98 community planning sectors. In addition to the policy plan and area plan volumes, the comprehensive plan has 3 maps: the Comprehensive Land Use Plan map, the Countywide Transportation Plan map, and the Countywide Trails Plan map. The Comprehensive Land Use map illustrates the baseline recommendations for planned land uses, transportation improvements, and public facilities. The Transportation and Trails maps show existing and planned transportation facilities throughout the county. Land use recommendations within the comprehensive plan are derived from and guided by the concept for future development and land classification system. The concept for future development consists of 3 elements: the land classification system, the concept map, and the associated guidelines. The land classification system divides the county into 8 broad categories that describe the desired future character for each area. The concept map illustrates the general location of these categories, from the Tysons Corner urban center, shown in black, to low-density residential areas, shown in green. The land classification system guidelines gives direction for each category in terms of land use, transportation, environment, public facilities, and parks and recreation. Land use in the comprehensive plan is expressed in general terms, such as residential, industrial, retail, and mixed use. The plan text contained in the policy plan and area plans complements the map and gives further detail about the land use recommendations and general policies for development and preservation. Taken together, the text and maps comprise a framework that is used by the Board of Supervisors, the Planning Commission, county staff, and the public to guide land use, transportation, and public facility decision-making. There are many terms used when discussing comprehensive planning. 2 of the most common terms are development density and intensity. Residential use is expressed as density and is defined as dwelling units per acre. The comprehensive plan typically recommends residential density in ranges. For instance, single-family homes are found in a lower density range, such as 1 to 2 dwelling units per acre, while townhouses are found in a higher density range, such as 5 to 8 dwelling units per acre. Garden apartments are generally within a range of 16 to 20 dwelling units per acre, while mid and high-rise apartments exceed these ranges. Non-residential and mixed use is expressed as intensity, as defined by a floor area ratio, known as FAR. FAR is a calculation of building area over land area. A neighborhood shopping center is generally about a 0.30 to a 0.35 FAR. As a rule of thumb, intensity above 0.50 FAR will generally require underground or structured parking for office development. To recap what you've learned in Comprehensive Planning 101, we'll now give you a pop quiz. Question number 1, true or false? Virginia State Code requires Fairfax County to have a comprehensive plan. The answer is true. The Virginia State Code requires Fairfax County to have a comprehensive plan to serve as a decision-making tool for future land use decisions. Question number 2. How is the FAR calculated? A. The first floor area multiplied by the developable land of the site. B. The total floor area of the building divided by the total area of the entire site. C. The total land area of the site divided by the developable land of the site. D. The total floor area of the building multiplied by the total area of the entire site. The answer is B. The floor area ratio is a simple calculation that divides the total floor area of the building, excluding the basement and parking garage, by the total area of the entire site. Question number 3. Which of these items is a part of the comprehensive plan? A. The policy plan and the area plans. B. Transportation plan map. C. Trails Map? D. Comprehensive Plan Land Use Map? E. All of the above. The answer is E. All of the above. The comprehensive plan consists of the policy plan, the 4 area plan volumes, and 3 associated maps. Congratulations! You have completed Comprehensive Planning 101. The maps and documents you've seen in this program may be viewed from the Department of Planning and Zoning website. To learn more about the Comprehensive Plan and planning activities in Fairfax County, you may also sign up for email announcements.
So that was an illustration of comprehensive planning from Fairfax County, Virginia. Every county and municipality is different from one another. And most of what they call the policy plan, that includes elements such as housing, transportation, and in many places, the concept of hazard mitigation or disaster planning is starting to make its way into comprehensive planning. But the overarching idea of long-term recovery planning as being similar to comprehensive planning is important to note. As we'll see in a little bit, planning involves a lot of community engagement. So getting the public to participate in the planning process is vital to have an effective plan that represents the views of the entire community. I challenge you to go find your own comprehensive plan in whatever city, town, or county that you live in. Now, some of you may live in a city within a county. So, for example, I live in the city of West Palm Beach within Palm Beach County. In that case, both the city of West Palm Beach and the county of West Palm Beach would have their own comprehensive plans. And ideally, those comprehensive plans would be coordinated with one another of matters relating to infrastructure and where the county incorporates with the city. Now, you may wonder, well, how does that work? Well, the reality is that the county of Palm Beach and many other counties have unincorporated areas. The unincorporated areas is, for the most part, what the county comprehensive plan guides. The incorporated areas, in this case the city of West Palm Beach, should be coordinated with the county's plans, but the comprehensive plan for the city of West Palm Beach would be more detailed and more specific to the needs of that particular community. If you want to learn more about those particular issues, I recommend you taking some planning classes in the School of Urban Regional Planning, but I needed to give you some background as it relates to this class. So the opportunity of disaster recovery allows for planners and emergency managers to take a look at land use and reconstruction standards and look at adopting such standards or modifying such standards, infrastructure and transportation recovery, housing recovery, economic redevelopment, environmental restoration, health and community recovery. All of these aspects, go from the disaster, the short-term recovery, the medium-term recovery, and into the long-term recovery. And the long-term recovery gets into daily life as we know it day to day. And all of these aspects of land use, infrastructure, housing, economic development, environmental restoration, and health and social well-being are all part of the long-term aspects of a community that represent the day-to-day fabric of a community. So the disaster presents an opportunity for communities to rethink the way they have been doing things for many years and gives them the pause to be able to go back and rethink and reformulate the way in which they have policies or programs related to any one of these aspects. Now, I put community engagement down here in capital letters because all of these aspects of the plan need to be coordinated with the community. The community needs to have a voice and a say in how that happens. The best example of this anywhere in the United States has been the recovery plan for the long-term recovery of New Orleans, known as the Unified New Orleans Plan. I was a part of this. I moved to New Orleans in 2005, not long before Hurricane Katrina struck, and I was a part of the recovery process when I came back from the city after being evacuated for 2 months. The planning team recognized that not only because they started the planning process in 2006, and they recognized that not everybody that wanted to be part of that community or who planned to return to the community were in the community to be able to go to local meetings. So they worked with an organization called America Speaks that used technology to be able to use interconnected location sites using video and computer technology of people all across the South that had been temporarily living in Baton Rouge, in Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, Birmingham, Jackson, and they were able to create a meeting, what they called a community congress, in the city of New Orleans, and included these remote locations of people in these other locations in a simulcast event that happened all on the same time and at the same moment, and everything was broadcast live over video to get the community input needed to develop the long-term Unified New Orleans plan, which was a long-term recovery plan. Over 2,500 people participated. So let's take a look at that now and see how that worked.
People in New Orleans have been challenged in a way that the rest of us will actually never be able to totally comprehend.
I miss my church, you see. I miss my family, you see. I miss my friends. My 85-year-old mom, she loved to take the bus services. So that's the thing that she's missing most of all.
I miss the lakefront. Here in Atlanta, it's dry. You got to drive 4 hours before you get to water. But that's the thing I miss New Orleans, and I just want to say everybody, just keep the faith.
I just love New Orleans. I just can't describe it no more.
We have suffered greatly. We've sacrificed, loss of homes, people, and we need to take this opportunity to make New Orleans better than it's ever been.
The soul of 100,000 strong. When the night goes to the east, we begging to come home.
Pre-Katrina, what was good about the city of New
I
Orleans?
will gather your children from across this land, for you are the soul where souls find the strength to stand.
There is people in New Orleans that's actually trying to help us.
New Orleans, you are not just where I live. You are who I am.
What a human being needs to stay on the side of hope and to be resilient is to know that they are loved and to know that their voice will be listened to. That's why we're here.
Welcome to Community Congress number 2 for the Unified New Orleans Plan. Thank you for coming out to make history.
We're going to talk about our visions, our desires, the opportunities amongst all the chaos and the challenges that we face.
We need every voice, regardless of where you have come from, to put into this plan.
To join together, every neighborhood, every age, every race, every single one of us.
This is probably one of the most empowering moments we will have as citizens of this city, to really work together to define what the new Orleans is all about.
We have got to go back to Washington together, speaking with one voice, clearly about what this city needs.
The plan that we will all work towards and use to rebuild our city. Nothing like this has ever been attempted before. Those who are sitting in rooms like this in the 5 cities, those that are sitting in front of TV screens, those that are sitting in front of their computers, Welcome, and let's get to work.
There are 2,530 New Orleanians participating in today's Community Congress.
We want to capture as much of the key points and information that come out of today.
What we're going to talk about here is fundamental to most of y'all's neighborhoods that were flooded, and that's the options that we're going to deal with in particular, okay?
What are your thoughts about these options?
We really want you all to participate in what happens with your city.
The first issue is education and health services.
We've put together 3 options for you to consider on flood protection.
So let's talk about options 1, 2, and 3. The data you put in is going to what we call a theme team. They literally read your input as it comes through the computer. They look for the themes.
That's a good one to send off to the theme team. That there be a neighborhood board, some kind of mediation team.
I'm going to vote for 3, but I'm personally affected by number 2.
Why don't we go around, do a little round robin, and hear from folks in other places?
We need to fix the transportation. People have to be able to get to work. They're coming from far. There's a lot of passion about that. There's a lot of discussion.
We need community clinics out in District 9 and 10. There's only 2 hospitals, and the communities are back, but there are no health services out there. And we need bus tickets to get to school, because right now we can't get to school.
Whoa. I don't know if you can hear it, but there are people clapping for you all over the southeastern United States and in some libraries and community centers coast to coast.
We talked about libraries, child care, all of the services coming together under the umbrella.
We got the options up. Okay, grab your keypads.
We'll be asking you to use this keypad so that we can go from 350 table discussions across these cities to, in fact, a moment in which each one of us registers what is my highest priority for flood protection? What is my highest priority for the city for affordable housing?
Flood protection, important on a couple of those. Schools is very important to this group, and coming right behind that is healthcare and mixed income housing.
They're the results.
They're the results.
I'd say give yourselves a round of applause.
At the end of the day, there won't be monies to do everything that is being planned here, which means we'll have to go back. This plan will be so persuasive that it says New Orleans is too important a city not to support.
Your votes today, your input, everything counts. I want you to know that I, as your mayor, will take your plan, your vote, your action, and your input and continue to stand up for you.
My guidance to you is please stay involved. Talk to your neighbors. Please make this a priority. Go to the district meetings. And thank you for being one New Orleans.
So you can see how the community was able to take advantage of technology to have a large meeting in the city and have many satellite locations to get people's input into the long-term recovery plan for New Orleans. They followed up that meeting with district-level meetings to talk more specifically about the needs and concerns of the various elements of the long-term recovery plan within each particular district and neighborhoods. So, the Schwab book talks about the recovery planning process. It starts out with initiating the process, making a decision to plan, form planning task force to guide the plan development, and then designated a local government agency to lead the process. Of course, there needs to be a start date and a time frame. There needs to identify and secure the funding and the data for the planning process, and then to define the planning process. What is the type of plan that's created? How does it link with other local plans and documents? And then they need to secure local elected and community leadership support for the planning process. The next step is to organize public participation. In this step, they determine approaches to stakeholder participation and forms for public communication. We just saw how New Orleans organized public participation in the form of having these community congresses with remote locations. People worked with their facilitators within that meeting and entered information into a computer. It was all sent back to the main headquarters in New Orleans where the meeting was being broadcast out of, and it went into what was called the theme team. I think one of the women in the video referenced the theme team. The theme team took all the comments from everywhere and looked for common themes and then started to list those themes, and they would take those themes and they would broadcast them back out to everyone in the meeting and get them to decide whether they agreed with those themes or not, and that's how they went through that process. Conducting research and analysis is always a key step in the planning process. So planners need to collect and review local plans and programs, including comprehensive plans, emergency response plans, redevelopment plans, capital improvement plans, housing and economic development plans. Then they need to assess hazards and risks to environment, buildings, lifelines, economy, society, and institutions, assess disaster impacts and recovery needs, assess local staff and financial resources available for recovery and identify the gaps, formulate the planning framework, including recovery vision and goals and priority issues, formulate and analyze recovery scenarios and develop alternatives for different land uses, economic, social, historic, and cultural considerations, and financing issues, and any other matter that relates to it. The fourth step in the recovery planning process is facilitating input. Formalize the planning framework through interactions with stakeholder groups, elected officials, and the public. Prioritize recovery issues, scenarios, and alternatives. That's exactly what this community congress did. They worked to prioritize recovery issues and scenarios and various alternatives. Because at the end of the day, as one of the gentlemen in the video said, funding is limited. So you need to have priorities in order to figure out what gets funded as a top priority. They need to, facilitating input needs to identify a broader array of financing and implementation mechanisms, and to confirm plans for plan development, adoption, implementation. The second to last step in the recovery planning process is developing and adopting the plan. The plan needs to be prepared with the elements as needed. The plan needs to be linked to other plans and regulations as needed. Solicit comments from stakeholder groups, elected officials, and public. Once the document itself is created, that document goes out for a pretty extensive review process to the entire public to make sure that everyone agrees with the plan, or at least has the opportunity to provide input into the plan. Of course, not everyone is always going to agree, but everyone should have the opportunity to provide comments and feedback into that. If enough people disagree with certain aspects, then the plan could be revised accordingly. Then, of course, once they solicit the comments, they need to revise the draft based on the feedback and finalize the plan. Hold another set of public hearings on the final draft plan to present it and to seek adoption from elected officials. The final step in the recovery planning process is implementing the plan. This is initiating pre-disaster elements, periodically exercising the plan, and reviewing and amending plan as laws change and after any disaster should strike. There are recovery planning organizational and leadership roles. As shown in the Schwab book, the public and stakeholder participation includes broader public participation and stakeholder groups. Under the plan development phase, there's communication and public involvement specialists that solicit the feedback from the actual public themselves. There's typically a technical planning team, and then there's information and data management and mapping specialists that all work together. This all feeds into the plan leadership, and under the plan leadership, there's typically a lead planning agency or official. There's a local planning task force that often includes key stakeholder groups from across the jurisdiction. And then there are planning liaisons, which include federal, state, and regional entities, agencies. One such could be a transit agency, that's a separate entity. Another one could be a state Department of Emergency Management. Another one could be FEMA. Another one could be the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Another one could be the U.S. Department of U.S. Department of Transportation. Moving into the final aspect of the recovery planning organization and leadership roles, you have the authorizing and approving. And this is typically the City Council and our City Planning Commission, who has been elected or appointed into these roles, have the legal power to authorize and approve such plans. The incident command system-based recovery model looks at having 4 domains underneath the management responsibility. The management responsibility is the responsibility for executive and legislative matters related to recovery, as well as policy making, internal and external communications, and legal matters. So this is basically the role of the local government, which has the legal power and authority to be able to develop a recovery system, recovery plan. Under this, there are the operations aspects of the recovery. That includes operations that execute the priority action areas identified in the recovery plan. There's the planning aspects, which is planning facilities, look at action planning necessary to prioritization and track actions needed to meet the planning goals. It also guides the long-term recovery planning process. Then there's the logistics. The logistics assist in identifying unmet resource needs such as personnel, space, and equipment, and packaging and coordinating these resource requests. And finally, the finance and administration aspects of the recovery model include finance and administration as responsible for managing recovery finances, addressing revenue losses, and establishing a multi-year financing framework for long-term recovery. In the Schwab book, figure 7.2 looks at key recovery and related roles and responsibilities of local government and departments and agencies. He lists these under emergency management, planning, redevelopment, finance, legal, building, public works, transit, transportation, housing, and public health. And you could read under each one of these the various sorts of items that relate to the roles and responsibilities of local government and agencies, departments and agencies with regard to each one of these roles. I also want to point out that you should pay attention to the federal disaster grants and loans in Chapter 7 on pages 140 to 148. We could take a look at that really quickly. Starting on page 140, there is an outline of the various federal disaster grants and loans, starting with the Federal Emergency Management Agency's assistance, including public assistance, hazard mitigation grant program, the community disaster loan program, the individual and household program, and then there's funding under the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, U.S. Department of Transportation, U.S. Small Business Administration, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the EDA, which is the U.S. Economic Development Administration, Department of Agriculture, and then other federal level grants and loans. And then there are state disaster grants and loans. And then there's insurance. We talked last week about the National Flood Insurance Program. There's state-backed insurances. There's private insurances. And then there are city-led financing tools. These could be capital improvement programs, redevelopment, special taxing and assessment districts, and impact fees, and then special bonds, loans, and taxes. And then there's philanthropic and private investment that also come in the wake of disasters. So, for example, the Unified New Orleans Plan was funded through philanthropic investment made by the Rockefeller Foundation. And then there are other special considerations in financing and disaster recovery that you should be sure you read. Now, I also would like to take a look at the implementation strategies and milestones and timelines, which is figure 7.3. This right here gives an idea of how the timeline for disaster recovery occurs. Now, of course, these timelines can change. There may be different tasks, there may be different time scales, but it gives you a good idea of what a successful disaster recovery would look like. Tasks here include damage assessment repair. And underneath this particular category, there includes damage assessment, closure and relocation, demolition, geologic evaluation, and repair permitting. And you can see here that the time scale of these can vary from days to weeks to months to even years. The infrastructure and public service recovery is another category under the tasks. There's housing and social recovery, business and economic recovery, recovery management and financing. And again, each of these can run in the weeks, months, and years in terms of its time scale. And of course, under each one of these categories, there can be a whole long list of different recovery objectives that planners can track the time scale for each of these recovery elements. The book also talks about the legal considerations in recovery implementation and then metrics of recovery. How do you know that you're recovering in a sustainable and resilient way? And it talks about those as well, so be sure to read those. So before I conclude, I'd like to talk a little bit about Hurricane Irma. Hurricane Irma is one of the most significant hurricanes that has ever hit the United States, certainly Florida. It did a lot less damage to southeast Florida than it could have done on its initial projections, but it certainly devastated the Florida Keys and southwest Florida and did quite a lot of damage to Miami, Jacksonville, and central Florida, really the whole state of Florida. Even did had significant impacts up in Georgia, which was without power for quite some time. Here in the photos, you can see some of the images from downtown Miami, Brickell area, and the Florida Keys, which really were quite devastated and hit very hard. All of us had some impacts from the storm, whether we stayed, whether we lost power, whether we had really severe damage, or whether we evacuated, or whether we got lucky. But this storm gives us the opportunity to rethink our plans, both preparedness, evacuation, and resilience for responding and coming back after the disaster. This is a very interesting time, so be sure to read as much as you can and absorb as much as you can and participate in the rebuilding and recovery of your own communities. Certainly this will be part of your assignments in this class now, and I want you to really learn from this experience. So this is the end of the Unit 4 lecture. Thank you very much. Our next unit will be Creating Resilient Communities, Part 1.